People call him names: the uncontrollable, a swordmaster who is stuck in his room, a man who is out of his mind, and the most famous one is the Count Perdium's useless oldest son, Ghislaine Perdium. This is what the best knight of the north thought about the protagonist, and he can't believe that he was defeated by this trash human being. The protagonist asks him if he liked his trap that he prepared for him, and the enemy still can't believe that he was done in by the trash Ghislaine, and that he knows all his plans beforehand by setting up some traps only for him to be defeated. The protagonist even confesses that he knows all from the start, how many there were, who were the spies, and who helped him with reinforcements. They were just in the palm of his hands. The enemy still couldn't believe it. He always thought that he was the hidden ace card, and shouldn't be defeated by the useless protagonist. The protagonist kicks him in the face, and informs him that he will always win in every war that they will instigate, because he already has every plan for every single war that he will encounter. This incident is in the near future, and we will try to go back to a year ago before all of this happened. In the vicinity near the Perdium estate of the Luthania kingdom, the protagonist suddenly wakes up, and is surprised that he is still alive. He can't believe it, since he thought it was just a while ago that he was fighting with one of the continent's top 7, the noble knight Idun, and he was also one of them, with the title of the Mercenary King. In their fight he was defeated, and regretted that he can't fulfill his vengeance. At this time, Idun still can't believe that he was the oldest son of the fallen Perdium household, who left after his sister was killed. And he worked hard just to track him down, and that they were the ones who worked together with the Delphine household to bring his family down. The protagonist was so shocked to know that there were other people than the Delphine household who destroyed his family. He was so angry at this time that he tried to attack again but was beheaded by Idun. And now he woke up only to see his younger version of himself reflecting in the water. He still can't believe it. He thought that he was hallucinating, and was captured and used by the mages as a lab rat. At this moment there was someone who was calling him outside. When the soldier entered his tent, he sneakily got on his back with a sword, and said that he will let him live if he answers his questions. And instead of being scared, the soldier sighed and was fed up, thinking that the protagonist crossed the line, and told him that a no is always a no. The protagonist was wondering what he was talking about. The soldier says that he was so tired earlier from all the tantrums and fell asleep. The reason for the tantrum was that he wants to be the commander of the orc raid group. The protagonist, hearing this, thought that he would never do this nonsense behavior. The soldier informed him to get his stuff, and that there are people waiting for them to go to the Perdium estate. When the protagonist heard this, he couldn't believe it, and tried to ask if he was talking about the fallen Perdium estate. The soldier asks him if he had a nightmare or something, and calling his own household as a fallen household will get him kicked out if the count hears them. And when he actually saw the Perdium estate with his own eyes, he thought that he was still dreaming, and tried to pinch his cheeks only to hurt it. At this moment he suddenly realized that he traveled back in the past. He remembered that when he was young, he hated his household, and had an inferiority complex which led him to do bad things, and that people around him criticized him so badly that he was unable to endure it, and ran away from his home. That leads him to become a very famous mercenary, and when he returns back to his hometown to make up for all the mistakes he had done, he only saw the remains of his fallen household, and lost everything. But right now, all the people that he held dear were still here and alive. He was so happy to know this, but suddenly realized that at this moment, they were trying to raid the orcs, which led to the slaughtering of the many soldiers that their estate had. This was due to the misleading report that said that there were only 3 orcs, but the reality was that there were more than 20 orcs when they got there. But right now, it will be manageable due to the orcs lacking in strategy during combat, and the problem he has right now is how to make him the commander, and gain trust from their soldiers. But suddenly there was an attack at the back at this time, and the soldiers informed them that the orcs were attacking. The protagonist wondered if the orcs attacked them this early on before. The commander was hurriedly issuing a command for them to get into formation and to not panic, and due to them letting their guard down and was not prepared for any ambushes, most of the soldiers were defeated and killed. But at this time, when the commander was still thinking what was going on, there was actually an orc that was attacking his back. The protagonist dashed forward and pushed the commander away from harm and attacked the orc. This led to the severing of the orc's hand and feet, which shocked the commander and the other soldiers, seeing that it was done by their useless young master. After defeating the orc, he turned to the commander and asked to give him the right to command and be the commander of the squad. But even after seeing the shocking scene, the commander still can't believe him. He still thinks that he is an idiot asking for a command that involves the lives of their soldiers. He refused him and told him that this is not a game, and even if he is the young master, he will not give up this authority easily. The protagonist was angry but understands the old man, because of his past deeds. When the orcs continued their attacks, the commander blocked him and said that he is still inexperienced leading a troop. The protagonist couldn't hold back, and immediately threw his sword. The commander was so surprised and dodged the sword, and was angry at the protagonist, but noticed that the protagonist was actually aiming for the head of the orc. The protagonist asked the commander named Skovan what was the most important thing in battles, and the answer was that there will be no hope in winning battles when your troops have low morale and are filled with fear. After that, the protagonist dashed to the ongoing battle to gain momentum. He appeared in between the troops and orcs, stabbing the head of one of the orcs, and shouted loudly to the orcs, so that they would only focus on him. He continued attacking all the orcs. The people around him were so surprised about the onslaught their young master was doing. The commander was even more surprised, and thought that it is very hard to do this even as a mana user like him. He can even see that the protagonist is already tired, but he uses the smallest movement when dodging, and attacks only on their weak spots. The commander even thought that their young master was a sword master, or even more. The protagonist continued to mock the orcs so that they would focus their attack on him, as he was running away. The soldiers were also riled up and asked the commander what to do. The commander was wondering what was the purpose of the protagonist. At first he attacked the group of orcs, and drawing their attention, but now he is running away. And then the commander saw the direction he was running into, which was the edge of the cliff. And then he realizes what the protagonist was trying to do, and commands his troops to raise their shield and follow the protagonist. When the protagonist saw that the commander now realized his plan, which was to push all of these orcs to the cliff. And when they were already at the end of the cliff, the protagonist stops and jumps backward, and signals the start of their troops' attack. When the commander signaled their troops to start pushing the orcs, the troops didn't hesitate pushing the orcs at the edge of the cliff, causing all of these orcs to fall down to their deaths. When the commander tried to rescue the protagonist, which was hanging at the edge of the cliff, the protagonist loses his strength due to exhaustion after the fight, and also falls to the ground, shocking the commander and their soldiers. While sleeping, he dreamed about his younger sister, and when he woke up, he was relieved that he was still alive, but his whole body was aching due to pushing his body to the limit. And then his personal tutor named Belinda arrived, and said that she was so worried about him, and suddenly he ran to her, and hugged her, and said that he was just so happy to see her again. He remembered that she was the only one who stayed by his side, despite his bad reputation, and when his family fell into ruin, she went missing and didn't see her again. At this time he thought that he needed to tell the truth to her, saying that a catastrophe will soon happen to the Perdium estate, and that he died and came back to life. But she didn't believe him, and thought that it was the effect of him almost dying to the orcs, and scolded him saying that all his bad deeds can put him in jail. She also reminded him about the upcoming festival in their area. When he heard about the festival, he suddenly remembered about him not enjoying the festival when he was young due to his trauma, and that trauma was related to his younger sister, who continues to hunt him because he did not go with her on that festival, and that causes her untimely death. After that he immediately hugged her tightly saying that he missed her. His sister was so surprised that he pushed him, thinking that he was pranking him. He was also wondering why she rejected him so badly, and thought that he was just playing with her. His sister reminded him about what he said before. He remembered that he was a piece of trash brother, who even told his sister to piss off, because he was annoyed by her, and her breath feels disgusting. And he said sorry, making them so surprised and thought that he was hit hard in the head by the orcs. When he tried to deny that he was not hit even once by the orcs, his body started aching, making them not believe him, and was laughing because of that situation. And when he saw this scene, he was just happy seeing them again, and feeling also helpless, when he remembered again the shredded body of his younger sister with her bodyguards. A moment later his sister's bodyguard came in, and told her to go and oversee the work of her servant on the festival supplies. And this was the first time he knew that they were actually having shortage in workers. He wasn't even aware of this because he doesn't care at all. And when he said that he will try to help, his tutor and his sister were surprised again. And when he went to the festival area, his sister tried to push him away because his presence alone scares the people around him. Even if he insisted on trying to help. He insisted on helping because he wanted to know what exactly happened on that day, and to prepare for it, he needed to know the ins and outs of the castle. At this moment his old servant was running just to meet him, after hearing what happened to him during the orc raid, and this made his sister ask the old man to take his brother to his room, because he was acting weird after waking up. Since he can't help it due to his bad reputation, He asks his servant the location of the abandoned training field in his castle to train, which also made his servant surprised. When he got to the training field, he was surprised to see the area clean and well maintained. The old man said that they maintained it in case he wished to use this facility, and thought that his young master was just going through a certain phase. The protagonist was sad hearing this, and said to the old man that he needs to live longer because dying is awful. But when he said that he actually died and came back to life, his servant was not happy, and says that he needs to stop joking. He then said that he will start training now, while the old man will be waiting outside. This made him think that he was short-sighted before, thinking that the people around him were his enemies. And regarding his younger sister's death, it was revealed that the one behind this was a lord from his neighboring territory, which leads to the Perdium estate caught up in a war that led to its downfall. His sister's death was the starting point of the downfall of his family, so that is why he needed to prepare for everything. And the first thing he needed to do was to train his body to get a better physique. And because of his past experiences, he already knows how to handle mana well. And while it was hard for other people to notice and take in mana, he can do it even on a chaotic battlefield. What he needed to do was to connect the mana particles floating around him and bundle it up as if he was spinning a spoon, and creating a mana core was just a piece of cake. But he is not satisfied with just one, thinking that he can't be part of the strongest 7 if it was just that. With the method from a half-burned book of magic in his previous life, and the natural mana core of humans, he plans to create not just 2 but 3 mana cores, and create a connected mesh of multiple cores to create an explosive force. After this, his body reached a limit and stopped. He realized that he still can't create 5 cores just like his previous life for now, and 3 is his limit. Although this method creates an explosive force, it also requires a very large amount of mana in return. This was also the reason why he was defeated by Idun in his past life, in an unfair fight with him versus Idun and his knights. But for now this was still enough because he is young now, and has all the time he needs. He will do everything for his revenge against the House of Delphine, and the ones behind them, he will make sure to destroy them. 1 week later, at the start of the festival, the protagonist came to meet up with his sister, surprising her that he actually came to the festival. This also made her sister suspicious of him because of the recent odd activities that he was doing, and was doing nothing but training for a whole week. But his sister liked his current self now, because she thought that he was returning to the way his old brother was before. This also made the protagonist realize that, for the past week, because of his action changed, the future is also slowly beginning to change. The general flow of things might be the same, but it is now difficult to gauge the impact of his actions, and that he needs to respond to each situation effectively. And now his preparation is complete. While his sister was having fun at the festival, she also eventually felt bored because there was not something new at the festival. But at this time, his sister's bodyguard invited her sister to check out other areas. This made him realize that the traitor was actually her sister's bodyguards Jamal and Philip. His sister's escort knights were trusted because they had protected his sister since she was still a child. It was also known that they were also murdered along with his sister that day, and now it turns out that they were the ones who sold out his sister to the enemies. The protagonist just goes along with the traitors, and they are brought to an isolated empty area. His sister complained because there were no performances or people in the area, and the 2 traitors were finding excuses just to make them stay. While they were arguing, the protagonist observed the area, and found out that every corner of the place was blocked with many obstacles, rendering their escape route. When his sister dragged him, and said that they needed to go back to the festival, they were blocked by Philip, and at that time, his sister noticed that there was something wrong with them. They eventually showed their true color, and said that there was a request, and then 3 men were slowly walking to them. These suspicious men were praising the traitor's clean job, and noticed that the eldest son was also here, and they didn't request to bring him also. The traitor said that they will also give him for free. The protagonist reconfirmed his suspicion that they really sold them out, and asked them if they could get away with what they were doing now. The traitor answered that they could just go to a faraway place, and that they were getting sick and tired of this place. They were also sure that they were not the only ones feeling this way. After Traitor Jamal said his piece, the protagonist just quickly sliced his body into 2. They were so shocked about what happened, and Traitor Philip grabs his sister intending to make her a hostage. But the protagonist just quickly throws his sword with mana on Philip's head, killing him quickly. Witnessing this scene, the hired killers were doubtful about the identity of the protagonist, since they only knew that the eldest son were supposed to have no combat experience, or didn't train at all. The leader of the hired killers also noticed that the protagonist killed the two knights instantly with the precise use of his mana. His sister was still in shock about the scene and asked him what was happening. The protagonist just hit the side of his sister's neck, making her unconscious. The killers were grateful to the protagonist since he helped them take care of the two traitors, and asked him if he was hiding his skills all along. The protagonist ignored him and was not worried about the other two. He was only wary about the leader who was emitting such strong mana, and he plans to end this quickly. When the protagonist attempted to ask who was the one requesting this assassination, they just ignored him, but the protagonist just told them that they will soon spill all of it anyway. The killers were not even worried about the protagonist, and plans to capture him alive and torture him, and the two other men started to attack the protagonist. The protagonist throws a firecracker to distract him, and stabs the head of one of the attackers while blocking and taking the weapon of the attack of the second attacker, which he immediately cut off his head. Then the leader of the killers attacks his back, but was surprised that the protagonist blocks it. They continue to attack, while the protagonist displays his long experience in battle, blocking and counterattacking the leader of the killers. But the leader of the killers is not an easy opponent, effectively using mana to block a fatal attack wound from the protagonist. And the enemy was confident that he would win this battle simply by having much more mana than the protagonist. Little did he know that this was all within the protagonist's calculations. The protagonist immediately counterattacked and kicked his face. The enemy was still confident, until he felt the attack earlier was different, causing him to kneel down and cough up a lot of blood. Then the protagonist just releases a strong mana, unleashing his third core. The enemy was shocked how he boosted his mana so greatly. The protagonist continued his attack, so swiftly and strongly against the enemy, and the enemy started to feel the changes of the protagonist's attack, and realized that the protagonist has become a different person, now that he has explosively increased his mana. The protagonist broke the enemy's sword and slashed his body, and stabbed his lower abdomen. The enemy was pinned on the wall but still tried to attack his hidden weapon onto his sleeping sister. But the protagonist prevented it by using his mana strings, which rendered the enemy's hand immobile. The protagonist tried to make a deal with the enemy, and since the enemy knows how to patch up himself, he broke one of the enemy's mana core. The enemy was surprised because one wrong move, and the backflow of mana could explode and blow up the whole area, and thought if the protagonist wanted to self-destruct with him. The protagonist just told him that he can manage it, and the enemy was afraid because he knew that the protagonist was not bluffing, and that he could actually die. He immediately confessed that the one who requested this was Count Desmond, and wanted to have a pretext in starting a war against Perdium and Degard families. After hearing this, he continued to stab the enemy while the enemy was angry because the protagonist didn't follow the deal earlier. He was still laughing because nothing will change even if he killed him, because they already finished their work with the Degard family. But the protagonist calmly said to the enemy that he was reborn after dying, and will make sure to make it different this time. Then he continued stabbing the enemy until he died. After he dealt all his enemies, he stumbled down and coughed up a lot of blood because he exploded his 3 cores. And then in one of the houses that was in that area, he entered and found the corpse of the son of Degard. He was killed along with his escort knight. This was also how they framed the Degard family as the killer of his younger sister. The protagonist plans to erase all this evidence and burn down the whole place, and he won't let these things happen as their enemies wanted. Little did the protagonist know that there was a person observing the whole scene. And just as the protagonist went back home carrying his sister, that said person just vanished from that area. The suspicious person reported it back to the people that were behind the attempted assassination of the protagonist's sister. They were so disappointed about the report, and mocked them for failing the task. They even sent Guard Knight and Frank, the leader of that group, which was the best that they had. The man reported that it was all due to Ghislaine Perdium, which angered them more because what they know about Ghislaine was that he was a useless bastard of the north. And they thought that they were just giving them excuses about the failure of their mission. He said that Ghislaine was very different from all the rumors and information they had. He told them about what he saw that time, about how he can use mana, killed the traitor escort knights, their own knights, and even Frank. It was as if he was a completely different person. But even if they fail to assassinate Elena, they still manage to take care on the Degard side, and are sure to make the territorial war happen. And the man was asking for another chance, but the surrounding people were throwing insults at him because of the failed mission, and didn't plan to give him another chance, and have him eliminated. But when the leader suddenly talks, they immediately stop talking. The leader asked the man what kind of chance he was talking about. The man said that he will get rid of Ghislaine Perdium by staging a duel, and he already has a person in mind to do it. The people were curious about who he was talking about. The man said that he plans to use Cain Loges to do the duel. Cain Loges was famous for his strength-based swordsmanship. Despite his young age, his body and strength is comparable or even greater than adults. He is the epitome of strength, and that the man was confident to say that there is no one in the north that is much stronger than him. And also he is the cousin of Gilan Perdium, so it will not be hard for them to meet up and set up the duel. After hearing this, the leader agrees on what the man plans to do but warns him there will be no next time. At the Perdium Castle training hall, the protagonist was still continuing his training. When Old Man Fergus saw what type of training he was doing, he was so shocked to see how the protagonist was effectively using his mana. When Old Man Fergus asks how the protagonist did it, the protagonist shows how he uses his skill, Mana Thread, and explains to him that he is using his mana as a string. He was also using this skill all the time in his previous life. He wants to train this skill effectively by using less mana, since this skill needs to have a large amount of mana. The Old Man Fergus was also surprised since this is the first time that he saw this type of skill. And how did the protagonist come up with this idea of using mana when he just only started his training recently? He asked the old man if there was something going on, and the old man said that he was there just to thank him for protecting their young lady, and the protagonist just answered that it was just something that he should do. And after a few days, the whole town was in an uproar when they knew that their young lady was in danger of being killed because of her guard knights, and this also made the festival on pause. It also made Elena frustrated because nobody believed her that her older brother Ghislaine was the one who saved her from those traitorous knights. But this made the protagonist happy just to see his younger sister alive, and prevented the war from happening. But this also made him sure that their enemies will not give up in trying to accomplish their goal in destroying their territory, by inciting a territorial war. And he plans to grow his military force so that he can prevent this all from happening. And in order to do this, he plans to enter the politics early on. When the maid delivers his food, he was wondering why they serve the dessert first, but Belinda just brushes it off by saying that he should know their situation right now. And they were interrupted by a shout outside their castle. These were coming from the town people, and merchants saying that they need to compensate. Their territory was full of merchants that make a living from the profits that come from the festival. Last year was good enough for them, but they were upset because the festival was cancelled after only one day. The protagonist realized that the current situation of their territory is bad, and needed to be fixed immediately, so that it would not escalate to even more problems. When the protagonist asks Old Man Fergus to have their soldier calm down these protesting people, Old Man Fergus informs him that there are no soldiers on the castle, because of the orc raid. They were sent to the forest monster post for reconstruction. Basically, Perdium estate was located on the north, which was still at war with the barbarians, and on the other side is the forest of monsters, where any monster can come at any moment to attack their territory. With no money and no soldier, this made the protagonist worried, but when he tried to ask Belinda, who was the one who manages all the protagonist's money, and used it to calm down the merchants. And Belinda just said that he doesn't have any money at all, it was due to him spending money like water. That the Count cut off his allowances. He was now worried because even if he had all the information from the future, it would be useless if he had nothing on his side, so he needed a plan for him to gather a lot of money. But at this moment, there was a soldier who was in a hurry, and when asked what happened, the soldier said that Cain Loges was looking for him. But when he got to the place where Cain was supposedly waiting, he saw Cain beating Old Man Scoven so hard that he looked to be heavily injured. This made the protagonist angry. At this time they are now face to face with Cain, who has an ulterior motive in going to the Perdium estate. The protagonist remembered that Cain Loges was the heir to the Loges County that also has an alliance with the Perdium estate, and that he was his only friend, and also his enemy. The protagonist asks Ricardo what happened, and he said that there was an incident in a tavern, but when they arrived they found out that it was Cain and his escort knight who was the culprit. Cain asks Scoven about the rumors about the protagonist, and after hearing the information from Scoven, he suddenly attacks him because he thought that Scoven was lying to him. And when Cain heard them talking, he told Ghislaine that Scoven was talking some nonsense, and that he only gave him a wake-up call to knock some sense into him, and it wouldn't have happened if he just told him the truth. The protagonist just listens to Cain's rumbling, because he knows what kind of guy he was, and he always treated him like he was his subordinate. And whenever Cain visits his estate, he always causes some trouble, but nobody complains because the protagonist was just his subordinate. Nobody looked down on Cain, while he was having some inferiority complex. He was always criticized, while Cain was praised for having the qualities befitting an heir. While Cain was looking at the protagonist, he noticed that he changed, and was actually calm about the situation. A while ago at the house of the Loges, the hooded person was proposing to have him kill Ghislaine, and if he succeeded, his backer would support the Loges family. Cain asked how to eliminate Ghislaine. They should know that he was also an heir to the Perdium estate. The hooded man told his plan, and it was to lure Ghislaine to have a duel with Cain and make it appear like some kind of an accident, while actually killing him. He will also act as an escort to support this plan and orchestrate this situation. Cain thought that it was an opportunity for him, and that killing his own cousin made him excited. Cain was also suspicious of the hooded man, and their reason for why they wanted to eliminate Ghislaine. At this time, Cain asked Ghislaine what he was doing, and told Ghislaine to bring him the things that he always prepared for him. Cain knows that the festival was interrupted, and he wants to liven up the mood, and wants to have fun. When Ghislaine heard it, he remembered that Cain always made him prepare some alcohol and women for him whenever he visited. He only did it before, because he was afraid to get beaten by him, and always made him waste some money. But he suddenly realized that the source of money was right in front of him, and that made him happy. Cain was angry with Ghislaine, because he was still waiting for the things that he should have prepared for him. But at this time, Ghislaine was kinda intimidating, while asking Cain that he should pay first all his debts, before he gives him what he needs. Ghislaine told Cain that everything that he prepared and asked for was from his own money, and he needed to pay for it, along with its interest, and a total of 1,000 gold. Cain was shocked, and thought that it shouldn't even cost 100 gold, and thought that Ghislaine was only doing it because he was grateful for his friendship, and called it a friendship fee. Ghislaine just brushes off his nonsense, and says that he should pay him back before he beats him up. The surrounding people were shocked, and couldn't believe what the protagonist said. Cain was angry, and thought that Ghislaine was acting arrogant just because he spread some false rumor that he defeated some knights, and said to him that he is only a parasite that is leeching off his land, and he was the trash heir of the north. And when Cain tried to attack Ghislaine, the protagonist just easily dodged it. The protagonist also counter-attacked Cain and punched him on the gut, but blocked the second attack. But after that, Cain just suddenly acted like he was severely hurt in that attack, and people around them were so shocked to see that Ghislaine beat up Cain. Ghislaine also noticed that they were only acting up, and had some other plans. Cain was happy about his acting, and the escort knight was happy also, because their plan was to make it appear that all this fault lies to Ghislaine in everyone's eyes. This will also justify them in making a duel request. But when Cain was about to throw his prepared gloves for the duel, Ghislaine was much faster than him in throwing a glove at his face. Ghislaine wanted to request a duel, because Cain insulted him, the heir, in front of his own people and assaulted his knight, tarnishing the dignity of a nobility. Cain and his escort knight was shocked, but was happy and accepted the duel, because they thought that Ghislaine is stupid and wants to dig his own grave. Ghislaine told Ricardo to bring all the merchants protesting in front of the castle, because he would make them a lot of money. Because of the sudden cancellation of the festival, some tourists who couldn't go back out of regret still have a lot of money that was not spent. Having this type of event will bring a lot of excitement, and will also make him a lot of money. The people were super excited about the duel, and planned to bet their money, while some people were happy, because they will get to see the protagonist gets beaten up by Cain. When they started the betting, many of the onlookers bet on Cain because it is a guaranteed winning bet. Cain was not happy about the sacred duel, because Ghislaine turned this into a marketplace. He even informed him that his sword will not stop even if he surrenders. Ghislaine also realized their plan was to kill him. When the protagonist was about to start the duel, Cain's escort knight interrupted him, and said that the betting had some kind of issue. The merchant who was handling the bets informed them that nobody was betting on the protagonist, while the people commented that it was an obvious result, and that anyone is dumb enough to bet on the protagonist, which should be on the losing side. When they proposed changing the contents of the bet, Skovan and his little sister joined the bet, and betted on the protagonist with a lot of money. The people were shocked about this, and the merchant said that it was enough to start the duel. Before the start of the duel, the protagonist mentions that he was the older one, and it would look strange if he is the one who will attack first, which made Cain surprised. Then when the duel started, Cain immediately jumped and attacked the protagonist, but it was blocked. Cain's attack was full of force, but they were all dodged by Ghislaine. Cain was satisfied about this engagement, but seeing all this made Belinda worried about Ghislaine's situation. On the enemy's side made them think that Ghislaine was already trapped. With all those overwhelming attacks and only dodging, the protagonist will exhaust himself, which leads to an opening, and will meet his end. Cain also noticed that Ghislaine was good at dodging, and indeed his skills improved, and said that he is only good at running away, even back in the day. At this time he pulled Cain using his sword, and threw him upward. The people were amazed and shocked, and the enemy thought that this would be the end of Cain. But at this moment Cain was angry, because he crossed the line, and attacked him directly after landing safely on the ground. The enemy was shocked to see that Cain condensed mana into his leg for the safe landing, and Cain criticized Cain about his ignorant swordsmanship. He said that Cain must have thought that he was the strongest, and any opponent will be scared once Cain uses some brute force. At this time Cain is now serious. When Cain attacked again, he just kicked the handle of Cain's sword and slashed him. This made Cain angry, but when he tried to attack again, Cain stamped his sword on the ground and lightly attacked his neck. With all Cain's injuries and blood dripping all over his body, the people around them were speechless and shocked. After that, the people were now praising Cain's improvement, and that Cain can win this duel. His sister and Scovan were proud about this, while Belinda and the enemy were shocked. Cain also noticed that all his wounds were shallow, and that Cain did this on purpose. At this moment Cain throws his sword and tells everyone that it is not entertaining because of the gap in skills, and that he will fight Cain barehanded from now on. Cain told Cain that he will use this opportunity to educate him by using his bare knuckles. Cain reiterates that since Cain is no match with him in swordsmanship, he will just beat him up using his fist as a handicap. Since Cain excels in bare-handed fighting, Cain added a 2,000 gold in his bet, and that he will win all of it. The people around them were confused why he would be using his fist when this is supposed to be a duel. The hooded enemy was now happy with the current situation, and that they now have a chance again to win this, since he thought that Cain can't lose in a bare-handed fight. The merchant calls again for additional bets with a new content of the fight. But the bets are now divided, since there were now people betting on the protagonist. Cain is now mocking Cain for his stupid idea in a bare-handed fight, while Cain still decided to fight him using his sword. When the fight started again, Cain attacked first, while Cain easily dodged it, and Cain got closer to Cain, delivering a strong punch in his stomach, and continued punching his chin. This made Cain drop to his knees because of the strong blow, while wondering why Cain had such movements. After Cain said to him that he didn't even started yet, Cain was angry and attacked him again, but it was still easily dodged by Cain, while knee striking his side, and continuing punching him again and again and again like it was almost endless. After the protagonist stops his punches, Cain, now with a disfigured face and battered body, drops to his knees again with a confused state. At this time Cain holds Cain's hair while lifting his battered face. He told Cain about how his father, Count Loges, helps the Perdium estate until it was on the verge of demise, just because of his friendship with Cain's father, but his son Cain had a different plan of his own. Cain remembered when he was young, how he criticized his father about why he was helping the Perdium estate, even though he knew that they were having a hard time themselves. Cain was so dissatisfied about it, and pleaded his father not to go back to the Perdium to help them, but his father just told him that it is because they were friends, and there are no other reasons. At this time Cain throws a strong punch to his face, while Cain was expecting it and tried to accept the punch so that it will end, but the punch never arrived, and when he opened his eyes, he saw Cain offering a hand to help him get up, because Cain already educated him enough. At that time Cain realized that he has already been defeated, and accepted his defeat. The people around him were so shocked, and after that they tried to celebrate the victory of the protagonist. The hooded man can't accept the result of the duel, and shouted at Cain why he admitted his defeat so early just because of some little disadvantage. But Cain was already done, and the protagonist walked close to them and informed them that they gotta do what they gotta do, and the hooded man was confused. And the next moment, the protagonist just shouted very loudly and informed everyone that the escort knight volunteered to pay for all the meat and drinks for everyone gathered at the venue, which deeply shocked the escort knight. The escort knight argued with the protagonist and said that he didn't agree to it, but the protagonist said that it is the price for losing the duel, and it also should not be deducted from the bet earlier. He also reminded the escort knight to add the additional 2,000 gold, and threatened that if they run he will kill them. The escort knight was so afraid that he agreed to the protagonist's demand. After the celebration, inside Cain's room, Cain tried to open a box containing all the gold that he won from the bet. He plans to hire a small mercenary corps, and thinks that it will also take a lot of time if he plans to grow his money. At that moment, his sister and Belinda appeared, and asked him about how he plans to spend his money. Belinda interrupted, and said that it was obvious where he will spend his money, and that is to give his fiancée Amelia a very expensive birthday present, because Amelia's birthday is coming soon. But Ghislaine was stunned to know that he had a fiancée at this time. After hearing Ghislaine's question, Belinda and his sister just concluded as the protagonist being shy and embarrassed. His sister informed him that they were talking about Amelia from Rayfold County. When Ghislaine heard this, he now remembered Amelia Rayfold, who acts as a noble among nobles, who gains support among her people in her territory because she is kind to everyone regardless of their status. But this woman will incite a rebellion and will become famous as the Witch of the North. Amelia turns out as a traitor because she joined hands with the Delphine Duchy that destroyed the Perdium estate. After this, the protagonist remembered something and asked Belinda when will his father return home. Belinda answered him that it is a week from now. After hearing it, Ghislaine decided to visit Rayfold County. They ask him why should he go there when it is not even Amelia's birthday. Ghislaine just casually answered them that he will go there to collect some money. In Rayfold County, Amelia is trying to give a shoe to a poor little girl. The poor little girl was overwhelmed by the kindness that Amelia is showing to her. Amelia told the little girl that if anyone has to walk barefooted in her territory, it should be her and not her people. Amelia ordered her soldiers to give food and provide shelter to her people, which makes the people around so happy. When Amelia was leaving the area, the people were very satisfied and thankful. In Rayfold County, Amelia's garden, Amelia is sitting while her knight Bernaf is cleaning her feet. The knight was praising Amelia, while Amelia stated that while her father only wants absolute obedience from his people on their territory, the people will only remember the one that feeds them and gives them warmth when they are cold. Bernaf stated that by winning the hearts of their people, it will also give Amelia a favorable future in their competition for the succession. Amelia then kicks his face and asks him about the outcome of the duel against the finest sword of the North. Bernaf said that he lost on purpose to prevent people's attention to her, since he was her knight. He says that it is not the time for them to show their claws, and that his blade is hers alone. Amelia then asks Bernaf about the status of the Arctium merchant guild that she created. He informs Amelia that the materials that was used on the reconstruction of the Perdium output that was destroyed by the orcs was purchased through their merchant guild. They are also recruiting all the knights that are leaving Perdium. Many of these knights are well trained due to their battles against the barbarian tribes in the north. Amelia also reminded Bernaf that her merchant guild should act like an ordinary merchant guild, so that it can't be exposed until she fully builds up her force. At this moment, they were interrupted by a butler, saying that he received news from the gate that the Perdium young master had come to visit. They were shocked why that punk or trash is in their territory. The butler said that the protagonist is here to discuss about a certain merchant guild. Upon hearing this, both of them were so shocked and decided to let the protagonist enter their vicinity. While they were in the visitor's room, Ghislaine just casually sat down while greeting Amelia. Amelia was not pleased about the current situation and informed the protagonist that it is not appropriate for a noble to visit without any sort of prior notification. But Ghislaine just brushes it off while saying that her birthday is coming soon and he is there to give her an advance present and presented a flower that he picked up from a merchant guild and plans to buy there from now on. When Ghislaine tried to inform Amelia about the name of the guild, which is the Arctium Merchant Guild, Amelia just looked at the protagonist without much reaction and stood up while saying to the protagonist that since she already received the gift, he can now go home, and said her goodbye. The atmosphere changes, and Ghislaine just called her name, while saying that she should sit down. Amelia felt the heavy pressure from the guy, who used to squirm and can't speak whenever she is near him. After that, Ghislaine just straight up asked Amelia to give him 10,000 gold. Amelia was angry, and asked if this is the will of Count Perdium. Ghislaine answered that his father has nothing to do with this, and told Amelia that since she doesn't have any plans in marrying him, he might as well ask her to give him money. He threatens Amelia by saying that a rumor might spreads to the Rayfold County, that she was building her own power, where the succession competition is fierce. After hearing this, Amelia and even the cat are super angry, saying that he shouldn't be joking about this. When Ghislaine said that he will keep this a secret and doesn't want to leave empty-handed, Amelia told him that it will never happen and called Bernaf. When Bernaf entered the room and greeted Ghislaine, Ghislaine remembered him as someone who was always Amelia's side and was a very skilled swordsman in the north. Ghislaine just told them that if he were to die there, a war may break out, but Amelia just told him off by saying that she will just reason it as a ruffian barged in and caused trouble and was killed by her escort knight. After saying that, Amelia immediately ordered Bernaf to kill Ghislaine. While Bernaf was preparing to attack, Ghislaine was just smiling. while thinking that he will be a little serious in this type of play that they are planning. They are now facing each other, releasing their own serious auras, when Ghislaine detected that something was amiss, and felt that the 3 knight armors that he thought were just decorative things suddenly moved. And then he realized that it was an assassin that was placed there before he entered the room, and attacked him swiftly behind his back. But Ghislaine just dodged the attack, and kicked the assassin, throwing him outside through the windows. After that, Ghislaine just mocked the both of them for their failed surprise attack, using some mediocre assassin, and then Ghislaine ran directly to Bernaf, and attacked him while mocking Bernaf, saying that the rape-hole doesn't know what chivalry means. But Bernaf just replied by saying that Ghislaine was the first one who was rude by not announcing his visit, and being rude to their young lady. Bernaf just locked Ghislaine's sword, and continued attacking him, and said that he should not be polite with the protagonist in the first place. Their fight consisted of blocking, dodging, and counter-attacking each other, but Ghislaine was on top, with Bernaf receiving the attack while missing all his own attacks. But this time Bernaf realized that all the rumors he heard about Ghislaine seems to be false, and that he can see that Ghislaine is not some rookie in fights. But Amelia was frustrated with what Bernaf was doing, and immediately ordered him to kill him if he really considers himself as Amelia's sword. Hearing Amelia, Bernaf switches on his serious mode, and taunts Ghislaine to attack him, but Ghislaine just ridicules him by saying that nobody can order him around, especially a knight like him. After that, Bernaf just attacked him swiftly, and Ghislaine was surprised to see that he was already in his front and dodged his initial attack. Both of them realized that they were fighting a difficult opponent, and continued their attack using their own swordsmanship. After watching the ongoing fight, Amelia was so shocked to see the lousy punk fighting equally with Bernaf, and at this moment, Bernaf attacked Ghislaine again. But when Ghislaine counter-attacked, Bernaf caught Ghislaine's sword and delivered a sword stab, but Ghislaine dodged sideways and tried to attack him like before. But noticed that Bernaf is now firm and released some sort of aura, and told the protagonist that his attack won't work twice like before. After that, he slammed Ghislaine on the floor, while taking Ghislaine's sword, and tried to stab Ghislaine's face with his sword, but it was kicked by Ghislaine, and Ghislaine jumped backward. At this time, Bernaf praises Ghislaine, and that he is different from what he heard, and that you can only know others by fighting them firsthand. Bernaf throws Ghislaine's sword to the back, and wonders about Ghislaine's swordsmanship. He was curious because it is not a systematically learned swordsmanship, but learned from an actual real combat experience. Bernaf tried to ask if he learned this from fighting some barbarians from the north, and mocked him because this might work if Ghislaine was fighting on a chaotic battlefield, but not against him. Ghislaine expected this to be a difficult fight for him. Bernaf's precise thrust of his blade that constantly aimed to the opponent's head disrupts your timing and sense of distance, and it is also difficult to overpower him with technique alone at close range, because of his size. From the very beginning, he already knows that he is an opponent that he shouldn't have tried to fight on, but he doesn't have a choice but to move on. After that, Ghislaine uses his mana thread to get his sword back, and hits Bernaf's head. While Bernaf was still confused, Ghislaine immediately follow up a knee to Bernaf's face. This made Amelia worried while shouting his name. While Ghislaine was in the air, and was about to hit Bernaf with his sword, Bernaf just blocked the attack and pushed Ghislaine back. At this moment, the two of them are shocked and confused, and Bernaf realizes his mistakes and is now trying to fight Ghislaine with all his might. But Ghislaine was happy, because he hadn't met such a fun and entertaining opponent in a long time. This is the end of the translated chapter. We'll continue when a new translated chapter is released. Thank you, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.